What's been the reaction among Senate Republicans with the president's tough words on Mitch McConnell in the month of August? Is it going to make it harder to get some things done?
Well, you know, they're both tough men. They're both tough men. I think they are both longtime negotiators. They have been in situations before where everything didn't go exactly like you wanted it to. Members were doing things in their district. I imagine what most members were hearing were either you're too supportive of the president or not supportive enough of the president without much discussion about a Mitch McConnell president or a Paul Ryan presidential relationship discussion.
Well, I want to ask you, though, this about a John McCain op-ed from Friday. He writes this: Congress must govern with a president who has no experience of public office, is often poorly informed, and can be impulsive in his speech and conduct. We must respect his authority and constitutional responsibilities. We must, where we can, cooperate with him, but we are not his subordinates. We don't answer to him. John McCain may be in a different place than you are as far as the president's concerned, but is that the general sense now that the Senate and the House Republican leadership want to reestablish that the legislative branch is equal to the president, not answerable to him?
Well, you know, I think for the Congress to understand fully and the country to understand that these are two separate branches of government is a good thing. I think it's also a good thing to understand that these are not people that you have much hiring or firing opportunity with as it relates to what individual members of the Congress decide they need to do. So certainly that's important. In terms of the president's ability in his job, I will tell you the one thing the president understands better than anybody in the country today is to how to drive a message, how to communicate with people using new ways of communication, and frankly, just a lot better at that than anybody else is.
Since I have you here and you're a Missouri guy, I had to ask you about what Jack Danforth wrote a couple weeks ago, because it was a pretty stunning comment. He was pretty tough on the president. He said, "Now comes Trump, who is exactly what Republicans are not, who is exactly what we have opposed in our 160-year history. We are the party of the Union, and he is the most divisive president in our history. There hasn't been a more divisive person in national politics since George Wallace." Senator John Danforth wrote this op-ed, and he was not happy with the president's response to Charlottesville. Any part of that statement that you agree with?
You know, Senator Danforth's always been helpful to me. He's a friend of mine. This is not unusual for him to set a standard that is not necessarily the standard that gets things done. We have to work with the president. I think it's a mistake to get in a fight with the president. It's not a mistake to disagree when you disagree. It is a mistake to suggest that somehow this president, who was elected just as the Constitution prescribed and has the responsibility to lead the country, that somehow we need to not work with this president, I think is a bad road to go down.
Is the president as divisive as Senator Danforth is claiming?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I was with the president in Springfield, Missouri, my hometown, Wednesday. He talked about the importance of better jobs and more take-home pay and how we could get there. And believe me, that's a message that resonates in the country. We're almost at the end of a full decade of people's take-home pay, and what they can spend on their family has not increased. The president wants to see that happen. We ought to all be focused on making that happen. That'll be one of the real tests of whether this Congress and this president can do the job.
All right.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and then click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.